Divorced Redditors. What is the craziest thing you or your former spouse did after divorce? Story 1. My ex-husband started dating his stepmom W. Has been in his life since he was 11 years old. His stepmom and him are still together almost 5 years later. His stepmom confessed her love of my ex to his dad a few years ago, and they have since divorced. The dad is now dating a 21-year-old. Dad is now dating a... I know all of this because I'm still close friends with my ex-husband's sister. It's so messed up, and I'm so grateful I left him when I did. Edit. I can't believe this exploded, haha. Here's the highlights. Won't say where it all unfolded, BC, small towns, but they are all from New Jersey. I am not. The father and my ex-husband don't speak. Basically everyone in that family, except stepmom obviously, hates my ex-husband and have cut him mostly out of their lives. It may have been a little grooming, but if you met my ex-husband, you'd see he's all around a plotting, manipulative Thai person, so I think it was the other way around. He constantly talked during our marriage about WT she was. Pornhub, if you are following, I'd happily play the non-narrator to a cinematic universe for the right price. Thanks for all the awards, upvotes, and comments. Makes me feel nice to get that off my chest. Don't marry crazy. Story 2. My ex-wife told me I could leave my stuff in our use while I found somewhere else to stay. This was a goodwill effort to keep things as amicable as possible between us. When I went to get she had burned it all. So that was rough. Story 3. While we were still married, she gets pregnant with the guy she was cheating on me with. W is also married to someone else. She has this idea that he's going to leave his wife and they're going to get married. She got a lawyer and filed for divorce. I get a lawyer too. Only thing is that he works for his wife's father. W is setting him up to take over when daddy retires. He realized that getting a divorce means his cushy career is over, confesses everything to his wife and begs for her forgiveness. His wife takes him back and he cuts off my wife. Seeing that her dreams of living with her are over, she claims that I'm the father, which is impossible because by that time, we hadn't had for more than a year before conception. This does not stop her from telling everyone who will listen that it's my kid. She has her lawyer drop the divorce proceeding. I tell my lawyer to start them with me as the plaintiff and that I want to dispute paternity. I move out. She starts stalking me. Esbabu is up at my job and tries to get in. I work as a civilian in R&D at a military base. The MPs do not take any of her and wind up detaining her when she tries to run past the gate. She calls me at work to bail her out or something. I tell her that whatever she's done, it's not my problem and hang up. I also was able to get a restraining order, which she violated repeatedly. She asked for everything. Both cars, the entire use and contents, savings, my retirement account, etc., plus 7 years of spousal support. I offered no support and half of the ETS. If she wanted to use, she'd have to buy me out and refinance in her name only. When the kid was born, she tried to put my name on the birth certificate anyway, but I'd already successfully disputed paternity, so that didn't go over well. She had to go after Loverboy. W was definitely less than happy to see her. In the end, we split the ETS 50/50ths. Sold the use and she got no spousal support. I don't know if she was able to get money for the kid from Loverboy or not. She called me a few times after the divorce, wanting to get together and talk. The calls were in violation of the restraining order, but I never reported it. About 6 months after the divorce was final, I was offered a new job on the other side of the country. I took it and never told anyone outside of my family where I was going. Almost all of our friends believed her when she claimed the baby was mine and made me out to be so I didn't really feel the need to tell them anything. Life is better now. Story 4. She removed the retaining clips from my windshield wipers, but put the wipers back on the arms. First storm after I got my car back from her, driver's side wiper flew off the car on Interstate 40. Good times. Story 5. Kidnapped the kids during their weekend visit and moved to a small town in the next state over. It took me 2 years to get them back. Wow, this got huge. So everyone doesn't have to read all the comments. I did get them back. She eventually burned all her bridges in the town she moved to and went me to her parents' use. Since her parents were not pleased with her sices and were on my side during the WLE deal, they called me to let me know where she was. I went and got them. This was over 20 years ago and they have both grown up just fine. I've since remarried and my second wife has been a wonderful mother to them. It took a lot of work to fix all the damage, but it's mostly okay. The biggest scars that lasted was that my son has a distrust of women with authority that he has worked really hard to get over. And my daughter was afraid to start her own family because she worries she would turn out just like her mom. She finally got over that and is expecting our first grandbaby this fall. Story 6. She called my company, talked her way up the chain to the president of the company. Still don't know she managed that, but she's smart, and told him I was suicidal and had threatened to do something drastic at work. Later, I learned that she thought this would be a roundabout way of getting my address, which I didn't share with her after I moved out because she's bat crazy. Story 7. Called me and pretended he had been hit by a car while we were talking. He even tried to voice the crowd that had gathered around his body. God-awful acting, but pretty funny listening to him try to mimic a woman's voice. Points for trying to be inclusive, I guess. I think he was trying to get me to relive my trauma of being on the P&E with a friend W actually had been hit by a car while we were talking. Too bad he didn't realize that hearing the real thing is worlds different than hearing a dumb try to act it out. Edit. I am so happy that I shared this. Y'all are making me laugh so much. Story 8. Stalked me for 5 years. Would make fake social media profiles to try to follow me, which I would block endlessly, and would try to find where I worked so she could talk to me. This lady cheated on me with 7 different men 2 months after we were married. I kicked her to the curb and made her sign the court papers. When we had our day in court, she cried in the judge's office while I just wanted to get this done. After, my dad was with me, and he threw $50 at her and told her to change your last name. Good guy, Pops. I haven't seen or heard from her in about 5 years, thank goodness. Story 9. Final straw that led to the divorce. Got drunk and drove her car into the middle of the desert. Sent her friend a picture of the GPS and said, I didn't love her, so I wouldn't come and look for her. She wouldn't answer my calls but kept calling her friend saying I didn't care. I looked for 2 hours before going back me because I needed to work in the morning. She came me and started banging things around and came into our room and threw her panty at me saying I didn't love her. Punched me in the face multiple times and went to jail. After I filed for divorce, she lost it. CPS wouldn't let her kids stay at the use because of the DV charge against her, so they stayed at her parents'. She purposely stayed at the use so that I couldn't see my kids. I refused to be alone with her after for fear that she would hurt herself and blame me, so I always went to the use with someone if I needed anything. She got tired of this and decided to just remove everything from the use while I was at work. I mean, everything that wasn't in my kids' bedrooms, she took out of the use. Curtains, ceiling fans, all of the furniture minus the dining table that I don't think she had room for. I taught well this S, but at least she's gone, so I changed the locks. She broke in and stole the locks the next day while I was at work, left nothing but the less and the doors to swing open in the wind, took the window locks, cut the power cord to the garage door opener, took the blender that I borrowed from my mom, and popped the air mattress that I borrowed to sleep on. Then she flipped off the main breaker to the use. Swore to the judge that someone else must have done it. Story 10. Kidnapped my 3 boys from my use when I went on my first post-divorce date. Our loved and trusted babysitter was with them. I left dinner ready and kids bathed and already in their jammies. Left for the movie theater when I got a text from my babysitter that she was sorry for not doing the dishes after dinner. So I texted back, that's okay, I can do dishes later, but you've got a couple yours as well. The movie hasn't started yet. She was at me as my ex-husband had sworn up, lied and said he was supposed to have the boys that night and that I had said it was okay. I was livid. I knew he was a bit crazy, but I had no idea he was capable of this. I stepped out of the theater, called him, and he said, if you are going to be dating strangers and endangering the lives of my kids, I will take them. WTF. So I called the police, they did a report, we went to court, and he was found in contempt for violating our parenting plan. Story 11. All I wanted was custody of my son. I gave her everything else except one of our cars. She fought me through 5 hearings. I won. She never came to see him again. Story 12. Wife cheated on me. When I confronted her, she grabbed a kitchen knife and threatened me. I told her to go ahead. She put it in my chest just deep enough to draw blood and cut down to my belly button. I hit her on top of her head. She fell to the ground. I left, and after signing papers, never saw her again. It's been 24 years now. Asterisk, asterisk. Thank you for the awards, peeps. Had no idea my idiot marriage at 20 years old would be the topic with the most upvotes. To see 12 months are full of good stories looking back. Story 13. After years of telling me she wanted a child, that she wanted to be a mom, that her life's dream was to be a Sam, she got pregnant with the first guy she slept with while we were getting divorced and put the kid up for adoption, even before it was born. This was a long-standing thing with her. She always wanted something. Car, use, dog, cat, marriage, etc. And the second she got it, she immediately hated it. Story 14. Laundry list. But my favorite was his sister sent a Facebook message to all of his contacts the day of our separation, including my family. Before we announced anything, her message stated everyone should immediately delete me. And if I said anything about why we separated, I was lying and not to listen. Basically, this created a lot of curious questions and a lot of laughs. Story 15. Called me on my birthday 2 years after divorce offering to make it special, and was quite insistent that I take her up on that opportunity. Was not amused to find out my GF, now wife, had heard the entire conversation on speaker. Good times. Story 16. She got custody of our 3 kids, got 70% of my take-me pay for child support, requiring me to move into the barracks. I was in the USAF. Then she immediately moved out of state without telling me, despite the divorce decree requiring my consent, all but guaranteeing I would have no contact with my kids. That's not the crazy part. The crazy part is just a few years later she decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore, so she signed up with a carnival, I think she had the TS for one of the ride operators, and left the girls on their own, without telling me or the girls beforehand. She called my oldest daughter a few days after leaving to tell her to call me. They hadn't called me before that because they had apparently grown accustomed to their mother disappearing for days at a time. Edit. Some have asked what's happened since. This was decades ago. My children are all grown and married, with their own children. They all learned after coming to live with me that I wasn't the monster their mother had brainwashed them to believe I was, and they all agreed to be adopted, as adults, by the light of my life, my wife, whom I would never have met if I hadn't been divorced. Only one of my children has any contact with her mother, mainly because my daughter still lives near where she grew up. That's where her husband and his family live, so that's where she'll stay. The best outcome of all of my children had the best example in the world of W not to be a mother, and consequently all 5 of my grandchildren are having the best child odds possible. Story 17. Prior to divorce, he established a pattern of asking me to sleep with someone else, usually MFF threesomes, usually friends of his, mine, ours, getting increasingly demanding, moody until I conceded, then reacting with extreme insecurity, jealousy, possessiveness, and need for rearrange afterwards until it happened again. It destroyed me as well as all of my in-person friendships, and I still don't understand why he needed to go through that psych drama over and over, or why I didn't leave sooner. To clarify, there is nothing wrong with swinging, polyamory, or ethical non-monogamy, but he really just wanted an on-demand service, and couldn't take no for an answer, and could not stand the tut of me having feelings for anyone other than him, yet consistently taught I was waiting to cheat on him or abandon him. Certainly. Before I filed for divorce, he broke into my apartment twice, once because he wasn't done talking, and then because the apartment complex director told him I couldn't legally kick him out of the apartment. Yuli altered me while I was sleeping, called the cops and DCF because I blocked him on Messenger after close to 24 HRs of non-stop texting from him, and CSE to publicly throw a couple of punches and an energy drink at the, still concussed, TBI survivor he'd sent as my most recent partner, as if any of this was that person's fault. Then he altered me in the backyard while refusing to leave and told the police I had attacked him. I filed a restraining order and divorce on the same day. 4 months after our divorce was finalized and he was granted full custody of our 3 kids for every school vacation, he decided to move halfway across the country to live with his mother. She's still taking care of him. His kids aren't particularly interested in talking to him and haven't seen him in over a year. I offered to pay for him to stay here over the summer so he could see them, but he said, "Nya." This is a fair reflection of his level of engagement with his kids prior to divorce too. I don't doubt that he loves them, but he rarely cozies to spend time with them because it's stressful. The cops, lawyers, Office of Child Support employees, and the judge have all responded the same way to his endless victim spiel, a tired sigh, a roll of the eyes. He continues to think his situation is everyone else's fault and totally unique. He follows me here and has quoted some of my posts in court. "Hi, Brian. Aite. Thanks for the upvotes. Let me know if you've had a similar experience." He's texted to call me a lying yet again. I've invited him to respond here, or please quit stalking my social media, as I've asked, or accept that we have different ideas of W things went, but we'll see. Story 18. My ex has done a ton of weird stuff, thankfully, most of it not aimed at me. While we were separated and working on our divorce, he would come whine to me about relationship issues. With my cousin, with WM he'd had an affair, and for WM he'd left me. Mind you, he'd moved in with not just her but her common-law husband, and then was upset by W many other boyfriends she had. This is my cousin W has more baby daddies than she has babies. 2 of her offspring are simultaneously half-brothers and cousins. She's never been known for her monogamy, in other words, but he claimed to have been in love with her since they were children, and this was magically supposed to make her return his affections. Among the best witnessed from a distance bits of this nonsense were him getting jealous of her visiting her husband and running her off the road in his work van, and generally hanging around screwing her instead of taking jobs, to the extent that there were trainees making more money than he was after he'd been there more than a year, and he was eventually invited to resign or be fired. Then there was the time he was doing armed security and angry at W taking our children on a first date to Austin, He expected to be allowed to stay over at this woman's apartment with his children and her children, and she was rightly rified at the WL thing. Didn't go over well. Had an argument with his girlfriend at the time, not my cousin, but the ex-wife of a different cousin, and drove to her use in his work vehicle to threaten her with a gun. This resulted in a firing, a restraining order, and loss of his right to carry a gun. Then there was the girlfriend W insisted that if he really loved her, he'd move into the mealess shelter with her. So he fabricated being kicked out of his parents' use and spent the requisite month sleeping outside on the shelter's patio before intake, then spent *years longer than the relationship living in the shelter, only finally leaving to move in with a woman he'd met a month earlier after ostentatiously asking our children's permission. As you can imagine, they felt they had no say. Basically, it's been *13 years of reeling from one relationship to the next, all overlapping, and the kids pulled into them from the very first second. He's currently trying desperately to find another girlfriend to move in with, as the current one is kicking him out to move to Virginia with a new boyfriend of her own. This after some time of subjecting the kids to loud arguments over his addiction and their dead life, and naturally blaming me for the fact that his two oldest children both refused to talk to him at all. Two of my sortie comings as a wife, by the way, were being too cly, he quoted Confederate Railroad to me, and not providing the drama he felt requisite in a relationship. Story 19. I was sending $600 a month to support my daughter because she's the only thing I give a about. My ex texts me and tells me I need to be sending $1,200 a month because she's broke and can't pay her bills, and I still feel guilty about it. She left me for another guy while I was on deployment. I told her to go herself call my lawyer. Story 20. We were living in a different state, and she wanted to move back to her me state a year into our marriage. I really had nothing tying me down in that state, so I was down for moving if that's really what she wanted. It had been about 6 months into the move, and she cheats on me with a coworker while I was working full-time and trying to finish up my bachelor's degree. She tells me that she didn't feel the same way about me and that she needed to move out to do some thinking. It's driving me insane trying to think about what could have gone wrong. I had a suspicion about that coworker, but I didn't have any proof. I checked our P&E account online, and sure enough, they were talking every night after work while I was out working. I followed her one time, and sure enough, she was going to this guy's use. I confronted her about it, and she finally fessed up. So they continue dating after we finally divorce, and I was able to move on with my life. She ends up getting pregnant by this guy, and he disappears before their baby was even born. Karma definitely came back to bite her after she put me through all alone in a new state with no friends, family around. Story 21. We remained on good terms and still celebrate lie days and birthdays as a family. His two youngest kids, with his current wife, call me aunt, and my youngest calls him uncle. Story 22. This was from even I was a kid and my parents were going through a divorce. My dad was a total sociopath, manipulative, physically and emotionally abusive, drug dealing, the WLE 9 yards. Even my mom was finally able to get out. He still had visitation rights. His family kept on bugging my sister and me, still under 10 years old, to try to convince my mom to talk to him. She finally did try to talk to him when she came to pick us up at the police station from where it was agreed to meet when he had his time with us. They immediately got into an argument. He started throwing one of his temper tantrum, grabbed my mom in front on a cop from the LAPD trying to beat her, then the cop grabbed him. He let go of my mom with a look of pure terror on his face. I think that was the day I realized he was sociopathic and didn't want anything else to do with him and his crazy Bible tea family. Story 23. He basically got everything, use, car, furniture. I just wanted out. 2 years later, he is broke and me less, wanted to get back together. Sorry, but no. Story 24. She would stalk my Reddit account and angrily text me if she didn't like my posts talking about her cheating on me. I came from seeing my grandmother on her deathbed and found she had cheated. She also texted me accusing me of sabotaging her attempts to get a job that requires a security clearance. Apparently, it was my fault and not the fact she had already been denied a security clearance for mental instability. Story 25. During the Dawali process of divorcing, she insisted she wanted to be single and hadn't cheated on me. 5 days before we sold our use, she posted on Facebook that she was in a relationship with the guy I had asked about her cheating on me with. A year later, they were engaged. A year after engagement, they are married. Story 26. Not me, but my SO. His ex-wife got married a few days after receiving the court's final decision on the annulment of marriage case. In our country, we don't have divorce. Well, okay, he has moved on already. Now her new husband plans to have his marriage to her annulled too. Edit. Hey, this blew up. Yes, we are in the Philippines. So hard to get an annulment here. I wish we could have divorce, where parties can end their marriage in amicable terms. Story 27. He had his law enforcement officer friends run my new boyfriend. One of their wives told me when I called her to offer my support when I heard she and her husband were getting divorced as well. Story 28. Here's a more wholesome and true one. He had Sunday dinners with my mom for many years after our divorce. He never had a real mom. Long story. So I didn't mind sharing mine as long as I didn't have to be there. Story 29. Not me, but my grandparents got divorced when my mom was about 17. In their legal battle, they worked out that they would each get 50/50ths of the sale of specific shared ETS. There was an old junky car and a fairly new RV. My grandpa sold the RV and the car for $1 each. He handed my grandma a buck in court. Story 30 told everyone I was physically abusive, at the time and now. I am not intimidating in any way. It didn't come out until 2 years later when she needed to change something in our agreement, but couldn't unless I agreed. I made her tell her family that it was something she said when she was mad. Her mom apologized to me for saying things at the time. We are friends now. Have a son together, so it's best. But God, I hated her guts for 5 years. Story 31. My ex stole a car and did 18 months in state prison. Based on what I was able to find online at the time, he approached a car dealership and swayed interest in buying a vehicle. They allowed him to take it me for a 24-euro demo. He never returned it. They reported it stolen after they attempted multiple times to contact him to return it. They then contacted the state police. Put a bolo out. They found him driving the vehicle on the other side of the state where he thought he wouldn't be found. I found out when I got an unexpected P&E call from the sheriff's office. I asked why they were calling me about this. They said my ex. I told them I would vouch for him as a character witness. I told the officer over the P&E that my ex was a lying sack of and shouldn't be trusted. The officer laughed, thanked me for my time, and hung up. Story 32. During the divorce, but after separating, my friend's ex tried to claim less ETS than he really had, but she was dropping the kids off one day and found retirement fund statements sitting on the kitchen table. Despite claiming that they had been using his income for living expenses and hers was going into savings, he managed to tuck away over $1 million into TSE2 funds, under his name only. When she brought it up with the lawyer, he claimed that had just forgotten to put Tess on the list. Story 33. Sex. Right after, we got the divorce, left the Curtis, and decided to have lunch. After lunch, went back to my use and had. That was several years ago. Last year, we decided to get back together, and we'll probably end up remarried later this year or next year. Story 34. The divorce was fairly amicable, but he met a woman on the internet and moved her into his apartment a month later. She hated seeing me because I had hurt him, but was also apparently still in love with him. Spoiler, I was emphatically not. She decided that getting my son removed from my custody would solve all her problems, so she called my work and made ridiculously false allegations to my administrator about my conduct with students, but sounded drunk high and wouldn't leave a name or contact information. Admin pulled her number from the caller ID, and X confirmed that it was that Hafer's Oregon P&E number. I had to get a temporary protective order for her, so X had her move out. Then she slashed my tires on Mother's Day. He confirmed that one after they broke up. Y'all, he kept dating her for another year even though he knew about everything. My therapist at the time told me that X probably found her behavior flattering. Story 35. We divorced because I am gay. Afterwards, she remarried twice. Her second husband, Jack, died, and she remarried for the third time total, including me, to Randall W. was her worst sicey of all. She finally ran him off. We decided to vacation together to New England, Montreal, and Quebec City to check some states off my list of states I have visited. All of them, by the way, except Hawaii. We did the trip like a survey course in that we spent one night in many different towns and cities. For instance, we spent one night in Millinocket, Maine, and we climbed Mount Katahdin the next day. Later, we took an 11-day cruise to Alaska together in 2005. We divorced in 1981. My ex died in 2009 of cancer. Of course, there were painful times and heartaches associated with our divorce after 18 years of marriage and the birth of 2 sons. But time can heal a lot of wounds, and former spouses can appreciate the part of the journey they took together, even when the have moved on to their next adventure. Story 36. My ex-husband calls me every November. Our divorce was finalized November 2015. Last time I decided not to answer because I'm in a committed relationship. But every year, like clockwork, our divorce was messy, to say the least, and after our final court hearing, we stood outside for like an hour talking about his girlfriend problems. I guess he just needed a friend, but I don't anymore. At least I don't need him as a friend. Story 37. Continuously texted at all URS threatening suicide, I would rush over to do a welfare check, and he'd open the door with a smile. Hey, since you're here, want to come in for a beer slash? Hard P. Starting upping it, I rush over, he's nowhere to be found. I'm calling his parents, friends. Turns out he was just at a bar. Another time, he left a funeral playlist, a note, disappears off the face of the earth for almost a day, reappears so drunk he almost ran into the use. After that, I just couldn't take it anymore. So the next time he started texting, I warned him that I would call the police if he was being serious, but I wasn't coming to check. He went 0, 100 real quick about W, he'd be dead before they got here, etc. So I called them. He ended up getting 5,150 ed for the night, very upset with me the next day, demanding a ride, and so on. I hung up, called his mom, said, "Not my mess anymore, here's the address." So then he just found new ways to torture me for a few years, but that one stands out the most. Story 38. Immediately got married. Maybe within 3 weeks was engaged in a very public way. In 3 months had adopted her child, and came crawling back 3 years later because she was codependent and broke and a bad mother-wife. Rejected, and they're still together, and I presume miserable and broke now. Edit, since I'm salty and sold love thy neighbor, let's unpack why I'm not and I won't, huh? My ex and I met in the army. I was cheated on the entirety of our relationship and their deployment, unbeknownst to me. I refused to have a baby until my ex got therapy for severe PTSD and refused to buy a use in my name we couldn't afford. I was effectively jasted. Didn't know X was me from deployment until they pulled up to my use to pick up their stuff with future wife right there in the new Benz X bought with deployment money while I struggled financially. Someone must have told X I could accuse them of infidelity, which is not permitted in the army, and I fielded hateful calls and texts from X and friends and threats of the new wife beating me up for months. In the twist everyone who's ever been to MEPS could expect, the wife was a dependopotamus and skirted them right into bankruptcy and stole X identity to take out credit cards. I was accused, the truth came out, chaos. X was medically discharged, lost the use, is broke and bankrupt working at manual jobs supporting a grown woman, doesn't even have $10 to buy her baby juice. Every few years until I changed my number, I'd get a call or text from X's area code sniffling, inviting me on vacation, prodding because I'm doing well and trying to gauge exactly how much I'm making. I'm doing. I've spent 2 sins and half a decade in therapy unpacking my hand in this. Rough upbringing, clung to the first person that lubed me, moved too fast in traditional PFC fashion. My gut knew long before my heart and brain caught on that I was with a serial monogamous W who could play my emotions like a Charlie Daniels plays the fiddle and would leave for the first shiny thing. I'm far removed from the emotion of hurt/salty/bitter tough. The way I see it, God, the universe, karma, gave us both what we wanted. I wanted to heal and grow more as a woman before taking on a mortgage and becoming a mom. My ex wanted an opulent use price be ed and an exciting Insta-family. It would have been nice to end in a way that wasn't a public Facebook post of their engagement, but hey, worse things have happened to better people than I. I occasionally see the 40K car they purchased in my city and chuckle to myself. I send a IPX is okay and remains far away, toot prayer up to Weaver listens to TSC, and I make sure to enjoy the beautiful life I've crafted for myself. So yeah, fuck that guy in the comments and the DMs I've gotten. Maybe if you got a lily every now and then you wouldn't be so salty. Story 39. Part of our agreement during separation was that he would drive the paid-for car, and I would drive the car we were making payments on still. The payments went through his account, they would post, and he would send me screenshots. Even tough, they would post. He specifically told his bank to not let them go through. And one day, as I was getting ready to go to work a Thai serving job to make ends meet, I walk outside and the car was gone. At first, I thought it was stolen and I called the cops. Nope, it had been repossessed. I called him and he basically said that's what I deserved. The paid-for car was in my name tough, so I scooped that up under police surveillance, so he wouldn't do any other nefarious. And now he drives a POS car that can barely make it through red lights, and I have 2 very nice cars with my new spouse. Story 40. My ex got preggers by another man after aborting our child about 2 months prior. I split to Florida and the WLE pregnancy, she'd taunt my mom. Every week for a year, I was getting a call from mom. Story 41. He threatened to kill me, so I took out a VPO. He violated it on a Friday before a lie day, went to jail, then spent his 1 P&E call asking me to drop the charges. Nope. If he frightened me enough to take out the VPO, then felt confident enough to violate it, why would I drop it? They let him out Tuesday after the lie day, and he had the nerve to call me and ask me to drive him me. Nope, again. My crazy thing was, I had a panic attack in the grocery store. The only one I've ever had. It was pretty scary. The manager was really kind, tough. Story 42. Mom's friend was getting divorced. wife was staying in the use, but left so the husband could gather his things, with her there as he moved out. While packing, he gave the dog a laxative and locked her in the master bedroom. Poor girl had explosive Malamute diarrhea everywhere. She was so upset about her accidents that she tried to dig through the door. That dog was such a good girl. It broke my heart. Luckily, the wife kept the dog and the husband was convicted of animal abuse charges, which helped the wife keep custody of the kids. Story 43. I had a 1969 Dodge Power Wagon pickup. No power steering, no power brakes, 4-speed manual transmission 4x4. A beast of a truck and a beast to drive. When we divorced, she took my truck, Judge said, since she was giving me custody of our 3 kids, and I would need the family car seemed only right. She got my truck. 3 weeks after finalizing, she was going down a muddy road and ditched it, damaged some of the front suspension. She called the local guy W/a tow truck, and he towed it back to where she was living. Since she needed a car, her told her he'd trade her a Chevy Citation for the broke-down truck, which she agreed to. He then called me and sold me the truck for the cheapy price he originally had on the Citation. I loved it. Had to spend a couple hundred on repairs, but she was freaked and ed when she learned I got my truck back.